Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight. It's such a pleasure to see such a great crowd here. My name is Emily Bjornberg, and I come from a family that has run the same small business in the same location in the town of Lyme for 7 generations. Today, my husband Jason and I live in Haddam with our 2 children who attend public schools. Jason is an Iraq War veteran, and while he served in uniform overseas, I took my first job running an AIDS clinic in South Africa. I currently work on issues of social justice with the youth and families of the Deep River Congregational Church. I ask for your support on November 4th because I believe that we deserve really strong advocates on behalf of our small towns inside the state legislature. Too often it feels to us as if Hartford does not understand nor prioritize our small towns. That must change. For me, this election is about building sustainable growth through support for small business. It's about holding the line on property tax by tailoring education mandates to actually improve our schools rather than just driving up costs. It's about putting our returning veterans to work, protecting our natural environment, and helping our seniors on fixed incomes.
Okay, that's time. You have to get your other points later. And Senator Linares.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here today. Before I get started, I just wanted to take this moment to thank all of the veterans that might be in the crowd tonight for serving our country. It's because of you that we have the opportunity to have this discussion on making Connecticut a better place. So thank you. I'm Art Linares. I'm your state senator. 2 years ago, the people of the 33rd District honored me with their trust and elected me to the state senate. Since that day, I have worked tirelessly to advance the causes that are important to the people of this district while upholding the rights and freedoms that we hold so dearly. I have tried to provide the best constituency service in the Senate, and when you call my office, I will make sure I get back to you. I have consistently traveled throughout the district to listen to my constituents' concerns, and as part of the Children and Education Committees, we supported the GMO labeling bill, legislation to improve mental health services, and the creation of a task force to study the chemicals of concern for children.
All right, time is up, and hopefully get some more points as we go on. And last but not least.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank everybody from a deep, personal place in my heart, because I've been doing this for a while, and by this I mean running specifically for this state senate, and it makes me really, really, truly happy to see so many people come out and spend their time participating in this direct democracy. So thank you. Normally I like to start with a joke, and I realize my time is limited, so we're going to just breeze right through this. And the joke is, what did one math book say to another math book? And forgive me if you've heard this one before. Anybody? We sure got a lot of problems. Yeah, and that's why I'm up here, because I recognize we have so many problems as a district, as a state, and as a country. I'm a fan of brevity, so I'm about to wrap up, but again, it's an honor to be here, and thank you so much again for coming out tonight to do this. This is what makes democracy happen.
All right, thank you. And we will start with our debate, and our first question to Ms. Bjornberg, and it concerns the economy. We have a lot of questions about the economy. So if you could just talk about what would be your priorities, if elected, to work in the legislature to try to get the Connecticut economy rolling.
I think that's a great question. I think that it's important that Connecticut finally gets its fiscal house in order, and I certainly will be a voice for fiscal responsibility inside of Hartford. But what I will not do is to balance the budget on the backs of our children and our seniors. If you want to talk about taxes, I think that we need to really talk about property taxes and what a burden they are for our small businesses and our seniors on fixed incomes. Around here, where we sit this evening, between 70 and 85% of our small town budgets go directly into education. We need to make sure that we're getting our fair share of education cost-sharing funds out of Hartford, and we need to make sure that we're creating mandates that improve the quality of our schools rather than simply driving up costs.
Thank you, Senator Linares.
Thank you. The economy is one of the most important issues for this district and for the state of Connecticut. In my first 100 days in office, I toured over 20 local businesses. And through those conversations, I was able to pass 2 laws that will help employment in our district and across the state: the Manufacturing Reinvestment Account and the Apprenticeship Tax Credit. I also think we have to do something urgently about the deficit that we have, a $2.8 billion out-year deficit according to the nonpartisan Office of Fiscal Analysis. That's a terrible issue for our businesses because they are afraid that we're going to balance the budget on the backs of hardworking people and increase taxes. We have to make sure that our tax codes are competitive with neighboring states. Right now, the gasoline tax is much higher in our neighboring states. The sales tax is higher, and even the income tax is higher. We have to have competitive tax rates. We have to balance our budget without raising taxes. It will improve confidence in our economy, and it will grow jobs right here in Connecticut.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett.
So, everybody wants to talk about taxes, huh? What can we say about taxes? They're too high. I mean, in general, like, taxes suck. Can we all kind of agree on that? The fact of the matter is we live in Connecticut. We all know that this is an expensive state to live in. It's also a truly, truly wonderful place to live, especially the lower Connecticut River Valley. I moved here in 1994 and have been here on and off ever since. And I love it here. And it's a struggle to be here, even as a person that's not a homeowner. I rent, I pay month to month. The point is that, yeah, taxes are high. We have to figure out how to stabilize taxes, especially for low and middle income families. But we also have to recognize what we pay the taxes for are part of what makes this state so great. I don't know anybody in this room, I think. However, like, we're all here for a reason, and we all have to recognize that, yes, again, stabilize taxes, but we also have to appreciate what those taxes are paying for. I mean, we can just 5 minutes from here, we see some of the most beautiful environmentally close to pristine areas in the country and in the world. And again, our taxes are helping to protect open space, helping to keep our waters clean, helping to keep our schools some of the best in the country. So yes, I think we do need to stabilize taxes. However, again, we need to appreciate what those taxes actually pay for and why we actually live where we live.
And Mr. Bennett, just to kind of follow up, the question was, how can we get the economy moving in Connecticut? You sort of pivoted to taxes. Could you talk about that, or could you tie in a little more for the audience, why you brought up taxes in connection with the question of economic development?
Sure. So I think that, or I actually believe, and I'm really confident about this, in order to stimulate economic growth in Connecticut, we really and truly need to go gung-ho toward a clean energy revolution. And by that I mean we need to invest heavily in new technologies in wind and solar, and then we need to promote manufacturing in the state. Connecticut has a long history of manufacturing. As we know, that's not so true anymore. Whether it be Electric Boat, or whether it be Pratt & Whitney, or those folks down in Stratford building helicopters, those are some of the few remaining companies actually manufacturing in Connecticut. However, we have the infrastructure to be a leader in this push toward renewable energy, because I think it's absolutely common sense that we're running out of fossil fuels, so we can wait till that happens, where it's like, oh, gas is now $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 a gallon, or we can really invest in the future by investing in a renewable energy economy that could be based in Connecticut. Connecticut could be a global leader in that new economy.
And Ms. Bjornberg, I don't know if you had any further elaboration or reactions to what you heard from your opponents on the issue?
Certainly. I mean, I think the best way to improve the economy is by creating jobs. And I think that starts with protecting the jobs that we have and creating an environment where new small businesses can grow organically with the people who actually live here. We need a voice for small business inside of our legislature. And a couple of minutes ago, Art Linares mentioned his Manufacturing Reinvestment Account program. That program was in existence long before he walked into office. All he did was take it from companies that employ up to 50 individuals and made it apply to companies that employ up to 150. That's what I mean by needing a voice for small business inside of our legislature. Inside of our small towns, small businesses are the ones that drive the economy, and they are the ones who deserve a voice at the table and a lot of respect from the people who write the laws.
Senator Linares, I have a feeling you might want to respond to that.
Absolutely, and I'm happy to. Yeah, one of the reasons why we had to change the manufacturing reinvestment account law was because not enough businesses were getting involved in it, and it didn't work. So that's one of the things that I was able to do in Hartford. Also, as a small business owner myself, I started a business out of the basement of my home. Today we've employed over 240 International Brotherhood of Electric Worker Union, IBEW electricians here, right here in Connecticut. We're creating jobs in Middletown, Connecticut. It's a homegrown business, and I'm proud to take my experiences from that to the legislature. We also need to do more. We spoke about taxes, but we also have to do more. We have to work towards repealing the business entity tax, which is a burden on entrepreneurs. Another bill that I've been working hard on is the Learn Here, Live Here program. Mrs. Bjornberg mentioned that we got to get people in Connecticut who are starting small businesses right here. That's exactly what this program does. If you graduate from a Connecticut college, you can start a business right here in Connecticut. You can save up to $2,500 a year against your income tax and use that to start a business. That's the kind of thing that will encourage and incentivize entrepreneurs to start their businesses here, and I'm proud to have supported that bill, and I need more time to continue to work on it in Hartford.
We're going to move to the second question. I think I'll give plenty of opportunity to continue this discussion. It's just Senator Linares, and we talked about this during the first debate. Governor Malloy contends his first 5 program providing millions of dollars in incentives to large companies, and his Small Business Express program providing loans and grants to small businesses is starting to grow jobs and helping the economy, but it's become a contentious issue. His opponent, Republican Tom Foley, says this is corporate welfare, and it's a mistake for the state to pick winners and losers and interfere with the market. So I'd like to, starting with Senator Linares, hear where the candidates stand on this debate on public policy.
Well, it's a very important question. The First 5 program is actually unprecedented in Connecticut. We've seen more money given to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars to businesses to move from one city to the other. Now, the Small Business Express program was needed during the time of the recession to help bridge that gap. But now our economy in Connecticut is still stuck in neutral. What we need to do is make sure that we get banks loaning to businesses. Instead of the state continuing to give direct cash to businesses, we need to use the state as a backstop, get banks loaning again, small local banks. I'm on the Banks Committee in Hartford, and it's something that I look forward to working on. Also, as mentioned, we have to get our fiscal house in order. We have a $2.8 billion deficit. We cannot raise taxes. We have to find ways to streamline our budget. We have to spend money more wisely, and we can't have programs like the Hartford Busway, New Britain Hartford Busway to nowhere, and expect to have a balanced budget. So I think those are some ideas on how we can improve our economy, making a climate here that is conducive to growth organically, rather than giving tens of millions of dollars to businesses. Thank you.
Mr. Bennett, what do you like or don't like about the governor's approach helping businesses this way with a direct investment?
So going back to kind of reiterate a point I already made, in the governor's energy plan that was released just a couple of years, a huge push was made for methane infrastructure, and otherwise known as natural gas. The majority of that gas comes from hydraulic fracturing or fracking. I think that that's a huge step in the wrong direction. In fact, it's like, might as well turn around and march toward regression, because it's just asinine to me. Yeah, absolutely asinine. I have to stop to think about that sometimes, because it's like, is this really 2014? Are we talking about investing in methane from hydraulic fracturing, which destroys people's lives, when the technology that we could be using and we could be implementing already exists? I'm not a fan of Governor Malloy. I'm not particularly a fan of his opponent either. That's a tough race. Unfortunately, for the voters of Connecticut, you don't have 3, somewhat viable choices up here running. You have 2, the lesser of 2 evils. So I'm going to leave it at that.
And Ms. Bjornberg.
I think to answer the question about the first 5, should we be giving tax breaks to big companies to keep them here? I actually am much more focused on making sure that we're doing right by our small businesses. And this is what I mean by bringing advocates into the legislature on behalf of our small towns. I do not intend to take my eye off the ball and debate all day long about the First 5 program. I would much rather talk about how we're going to augment support for small businesses by upping their access to credit, helping them to create jobs, cut red tape, and lower barriers. But the other piece of that is that in my experience, there are a lot of things that people who live in the lower Connecticut River Valley will put up with from their politicians. But disingenuousness is not one of them. And for Art Linares to sit here and talk about the First 5 program as being very expensive, my family has run the same small business in the same location for 7 generations, and we have never stood there with our hand out for the government to give us money. Last year, Green Skies took in $350,000 from the Small Business Express program, which Art then voted against for other people. Also, last year, they were awarded 1/3 of all of the ZREC grants, which is tens of millions of dollars in ratepayer subsidies. That is inexcusable for somebody to be pulling in that kind of money into his business and then stand up here and talk about how he is going to hold the line on fiscal responsibility.
Senator Linares, your response?
Absolutely. Yes, Green Skies did take a Small Business Express grant years ago during the recession. Green Skies is a recession-born business. It was important now, at that time, more than ever, to create jobs, to be an entrepreneur, and I supported the Small Business Express program at that time. And right now, what we need to do is find ways to let our economy grow organically. And that means, and I find it interesting that my opponent, who had mentioned that the First 5 program is a tax credit. It's actually direct cash, it's a grant, so you should study that a bit more. But it's important that...
Please, let's respect all the candidates.
Yeah. So, I've created jobs, and I find it funny that my opponent and oftentimes people in the opposition party would attack a growing solar company that has created hundreds of jobs in this state and has the equivalent of building over 80 megawatts of clean, renewable energy that has the equivalent of planting thousands of trees and preventing tens of thousands of tons of carbon monoxide from entering this atmosphere. It's created jobs, and I'm proud of that. So I respectfully disagree with my opponent, and I'm going to continue to create jobs in this state for the people that I represent, and happy to vote for bills that are pro-economic growth and will create jobs for the state.
Mr. Benny, you'll be getting the next question, but I want to give you a chance. You want to weigh in any on the discussion we just heard?
All I'll say is, yikes. In 2012, I ran for Congress for the Green Party. I ran against Joe Courtney, the obvious sitting congressperson, and some other folks. And that was not nearly as brutal as this one, so kudos to you.
All right, Mr. Benny, you get the next question. We had a few questions about regulation. The impression there's too much regulation on businesses in Connecticut, that there's room for streamlining to make Connecticut a more business-friendly place. And our questioners want to know, do you have any ideas to improving the environment as it concerns regulations here in Connecticut? And you get first crack at that, Mr. Bennett.
Again, I'll be brief. In my life, I spend a lot of time as both an activist and an organizer. You can use the term community organizer, although it's not 100% accurate. But the point is, a lot of the discussions I have among my friends and peers is this idea versus lifestyle activism, that is being the change we wish to see in the world, as opposed to, government-imposed change. Like, for example, California is on the precipice of outlawing plastic bags, which is a huge, awesome step. Hundreds of millions, if not billions, of plastic bags in that state every year are polluting the environment. However, what really drives that change? It's us as individuals, as citizens, as people operating in our communities, in our district, in our state. So yeah, regulation in most, if not all cases is important, but what's really important is us acting the way that we want to see. We talk about small businesses. I mean, I'm just going to put this out there, like, Old Lyme's got, is it still AMP? No, it's Big Y, right? Yeah, so Big Y, not a small business, you know, definitely not. They've got chains, I mean, franchises all over the place. How many people go to Old Saybrook and shop at Walt's, a legitimate small business? A couple of people, good. So maybe this is a good crowd. The point is, if we want to support small businesses, we need to put our money where our mouth is and actually go out and support those darn businesses, not just rely on the government for grants, loans, and other programs that's going to support those businesses. It's up to us to actually do that.
And Ms. Bjornberg, the question was, do we have a regulation problem in Connecticut? Is there too much regulation? And if so, what would you do about it?
I think that there are way too many regulations in the state of Connecticut, and that they certainly affect small business in greater proportion than they affect large business. And that has to do with the fact that small businesses often don't have teams of lawyers and accountants that can go to bat for them and make sure that the regulations are tailored accordingly. So once again, I will go back to my point of making sure that we finally have a voice that cares about our small businesses in Hartford.
And Senator Linares.
We need to do more as far as streamlining and cutting red tape in government. I remember starting a business, when I started Green Skies years ago. I remember going to the Secretary of State's office and filing the business entity tax, $250 right off the bat when you go to start a business. That's a lot for an entrepreneur. We need to find ways to get rid of that business entity tax. Also, we need to do a much better job in streamlining the permitting process, helping make sure that towns can grow their grand list with small businesses locally. So I am all for working with small business owners, including the CBIA, Connecticut Business and Industry Association, on their plan to take Connecticut to the top 20 places to start and grow business in the nation by 2017. That's a new plan that they've come out with. I suggest you go out there and read it. It's great. I subscribe to it. We need to have a predictable, consistent tax code here in Connecticut to do that, and that's what I'm committed to doing.
Thank you. Could our timekeepers do the math and hold it up so the candidates know? We're waiting for Senator Linares' total. And here it comes. Just so the candidates know how much time they have to work with, okay? All right, the next question is to Ms. Bjornberg, and it has to do, what ideas would you bring to Hartford to address the state's underfunded pension liability? Big issue in Hartford.
Again, I think that has to do with making sure that our economy is chugging along once more. I think that we have been through a heck of a recession right now. I think that we have all made a shared sacrifice, and we need to make sure that the path that we are on for growth is sustainable. Part of that, I think, is about making a climate that is friendly for new small businesses to grow and grow organically with the people who actually live here. Part of it is about removing red tape. Part of it is certainly about tailoring mandates so that they do not stand in the way of small business. And part of it as well is about easing the property tax burden that unduly burdens both homeowners and small business owners.
Thank you. And Senator Linares, what can be done to address the underfunded pension liability
Absolutely.
Situation?
It's a great question. It's a very important issue. In Connecticut, we have $6.68 billion of unfunded liabilities. Now, debt can be a good thing for families to go buy a car, to buy a home, to start a business, but it's a bad thing when you don't have a plan to pay it back. And right now, we have to come up with a plan to pay down our unfunded liabilities. The teacher pension liability alone is over $11 billion. So we have to hold spending. We cannot continue to spend money we don't have. And when we have a surplus, we use it to pay down our debt and unfunded liabilities.
And Mr. Bennett?
I agree with Emily.
Didn't use up much time there. Did you get that? 2 seconds, I think. Next question is Senator Linares. Senator Linares, you now have a record to defend, unlike the last time we had one of these debates. And I had a question concerning that. And I can't vouch for the claim in this, but I'm sure you can address it. The question is, why do you have the second lowest voting record in the Senate on the environment, according to the Nonpartisan League of Conservation Voters? Senator Linares.
Part of the issue with my voting record for the environment is that the votes that are counted for your voting record are in committee and not on the Senate floor. And sometimes in committee, bills that are not fully finished, you have to vote no to flag the bill before it moves on. And quite honestly, to take a shot at a legislator for voting no on a bill in committee is really uncalled for. So I have a good record, supporting the environment. I voted to end the Haddam land swap, which was a big issue in this district. I voted to allocate funding to the old Saybrook Preserve to preserve over 1,000 acres for open space there. I voted to ban fracking waste from entering the state. I voted for GMO labeling, which is a huge environmental issue in this state, and people have a right to know what's in their food. And I have a record in the private sector of building clean renewable energy for this state and across the country, and I'm proud of that record. And I think that preventing thousands of tons of carbon dioxide from entering the atmosphere in my careers in the private sector is something to be proud of, and I'm happy about that. And I want to take ideas on how to improve our climate to the legislature next year.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett, just changing up the question a little, because obviously I don't think I'm going to explain the senator's voting record, but if you could talk about environmental priorities and perhaps how you think they should be changed as concerns state policy. Mr. Bennett.
So first of all, thank you, Art, for that vote on the preserve. That was a big one. I mean, credit where credit is due. The preserve, that was a big one. So how much time do I have? Because the environment's kind of my thing. So I talked a little bit about investing gung-ho in a clean energy economy. Again, that's promoting both new technologies and then also the manufacture of existing technology, specifically in wind and solar. Burlington, Vermont just announced that it was going to be 100% powered by renewable energy. Of course, there's a caveat because part of that comes from biomass, which is problematic in a lot of ways. But nonetheless, at Burlington, Vermont, so much further north with much harsher winters, can be going hung-ho for solar. Germany can be on the way to 100% renewable energy, so can Connecticut. Further, I think that, we'll simply put that the environment is the issue that matters most. I don't think that that's necessarily true for me. I think it's true for everybody because, quite frankly, if we don't have clean air and we don't have clean water, we cease to survive. We literally need those things for our very survival. There's myriad other important issues out there, but really those two issues come first. Again, without clean air and clean water, nothing else really matters. I think that a priority should be truly, truly preserving the open space in Connecticut, specifically in the lower Connecticut River Valley. I think that, again, going back to my opening statement or soon after, we live in a truly remarkable area in terms of just the natural beauty here, and I think that that's the appeal for a lot of people with the Connecticut River and Long Island Sound, and we have the preserve now. All of those things are truly, truly wonderful, and I could go on and on and on. Again, the environment's kind of my thing, but I'll leave it at that.
And to Ms. Bjornberg, the question was the environment generally, and particularly Senator Linares' voting record.
Absolutely, thank you. It's a great question. And periodically when people ask me what I think the most important issues in this election are, I say economy, education, and environment in that order. But that those three things in particularly are almost impossible to untangle inside of the 33rd State Senate District. I've been very proud over the past 8 years to have been a volunteer for the Lyme Land Conservation Trust. I steward several of their properties, I perform trail maintenance, and I monitor the fish ladder. And for those of you who don't know, the Lyme Land Conservation Trust has preserved a higher percentage of land in perpetuity than any other town in the state of Connecticut. I was also a proud advocate for the 1,000-acre preserve with leaders like Representative Phil Miller and local volunteers and land trusts who fought for decades to bring that to reality. And while we're talking about the topic of the environment, I think it is would be remiss not to notice that Art's record is the second worst in the entire Connecticut State Senate. And I want to talk about the point that you seem to think that it is an unfair shot to talk about your voting record. That's the job. And if you don't want the job, I'm happy to have it.
Please.
The reason that Art was ranked by the League of Conservation Voters as having the second worst environmental record in the Connecticut State Senate this year, it was because of 3 votes. And they all had to do with toxic exposure to our children. The first one was a ban that would have kept fire retardants away from our children's clothing. The second one would have kept toxic pesticides off of our sports fields at our high schools and therefore out of our groundwater. And the last one, they wanted to create a watch list of chemicals of high concern to children. I think that our environment and our children deserve better representation in Hartford. And while we were on the topic of children and toxins, people in this audience should know that Art recently had the opportunity to study the issue of cadmium and create policy that would have protected our children, and in particular our little girls. Cadmium is a heavy metal, much like lead, that manufacturers are using in children's jewelry. Cadmium has been classified by the FDA as a potential neurotoxin and carcinogen both. But instead of seizing the opportunity to protect our kids, in this case, Art stepped off the panel and appointed an industry lobbyist from another state who believes that the dangers of lead are fiction. I think that every parent sitting in this room right now deserves an explanation as to why.
Thank you. Senator Linares, would you like to respond?
All right. Well, those comments are completely misleading and false. First of all, as far as the issue goes with pesticides on school grounds, we already have a ban in elementary school, for elementary schools and for middle schools. The bill that Ms. Bjornberg is speaking about is for high schools. And we had this discussion in my committee. The bill was not supported by her caucus. There were Democrats in the state Senate that did not support the bill, and here's why. Because in order to implement that bill, school systems like Old Lyme and like Westbrook would have had to make sure that pesticides were not used on their high school grounds the following year. This would have put the town of Westbrook in a $200,000 to $300,000 hole for their budget. The small towns that I represent can't afford that. And so one thing that I support with the League of Conservation Voters, and I will be working on them when I return to the Senate next year, I will be working with them on this when I return to the Senate next year, is we need to come up with an appropriate transition for pesticides to be used on high school grounds so that small towns are able to make sure that they can see it through. Also, as far as the cadmium task force, I supported the task force. I'm an advocate for it. I helped pass the law in the Senate. And also, there was absolutely no requirement for me to sit on the task force. I advocated to have a gentleman named Brent who has been in children's jewelry, in the children's jewelry industry for over 25 years. He is an advocate for making sure that children's jewelry is safe for everyone. That's what he spent his career doing, so I thought he was a good person to be on the task force. I'm surprised that my opponent brought up the League of Conservation Voters. It's interesting because they didn't endorse her. And part of the reason is because they know that I am an advocate in the Senate for the environment, for healthy children. And let's talk about another children's issue. The fact that every child born in Connecticut is born with $27,000 of debt. That's an issue we have to consider. We have to be able to solve this problem for long-term debt liabilities in our financial situation in Hartford. And quite honestly, my opponent has no plan to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to get to all the questions we can. And the next question goes to Mr. Bennett. And changing gears, the question is on education. A major education reform bill was passed 2 sessions ago by the legislature. And a couple of questions regard, did you support those initiatives, or would you seek some repeal or changes in some of them? And Mr. Bennett, you get the first shot.
So I used to be a full-time teacher. I taught for a year at St. Sebastian's School in Middletown as a first grade teacher. I taught for a year at St. Mary's School in New London as a fourth grade teacher. And I spent a year plus at each of those schools as a part-time teacher. I no longer am a full-time teacher. However, I'm a substitute teacher in Region 4, which is Chester, Deep River, and Essex. And I absolutely love that job, 100%. The pay is crap, I'll be honest. I can barely survive, quite honestly. However, I love the job so much that I always look for excuses to keep doing it. The point of this is that, I'll mention one other thing. I come from a long, well, at least all my immediate family, save one, are educators. My dad was a superintendent for like 30 years. My mom was a teacher and a principal. Almost all my brothers and sisters again, are teachers of some sort. So it's kind of in my blood to be an educator. But as my role as a substitute in Region 4, I see firsthand the effects of things like No Child Left Behind, of Common Core. Had to pause and think, like, again, this is 2014 and we're implementing things like Common Core. Like, how did we get here? You just got to shake your head sometimes. And then one of my best friends also just became a full-time teacher. Congratulations, Carissa. She's not in the audience, but she got a job as a middle school English teacher in Danbury. And I hear from so many teachers that this focus on standardized tests is doing nothing at all to help children. And I think that we 100% need to move away from standardized tests, and we need to really put the focus back in the classroom on the teachers to be able to teach the way that they need to teach to meet the needs of the children in their classroom.
Ms. Bjornberg, if you could kind of highlight what you liked or what you maybe didn't like about the legislation that passed education reform.
As a mother of 2 small children in our public school system, this is important to me on a very personal level. The fact is that we have some of the best schools in the nation in Connecticut, and I think we've got to do everything we can to keep it that way. And the truth of the matter at the end of the day is that if we don't get this right, the real losers in the situation are our children. Common Core, standardized tests, teacher evaluation, all 3 of those things hinge on implementation. It is without a doubt that education is the engine of opportunity in this country, and that it is very important that we fight for it and that we prioritize it accordingly. Art Linares, you voted against education funding for children that attend school right here in this auditorium every day. In Lyme, and in Old Lyme, and in Old Saybrook, and in Westbrook, and in all the towns in the 33rd District.
Senator Linares, the education reform bill and your points on it.
Absolutely. Well, I had the honor and the privilege to serve with Representative Giuliano, who's here tonight on the Education Committee, and we pushed diligently in Hartford for more flexibility for our local school systems, for parents and teachers to make sure that they have more of a say and local control over their boards of education. We need to make sure that the student school board of ed here in Old Lyme and Westbrook are able to tailor education to the needs of their students. I've also supported early childhood education because every dollar we invest in early childhood education, we save $9 in the future. I'm a huge advocate for public schools. I went to public schools, and I support our local public schools. And also, before I only have a few more minutes left, but I wanted to say HK High School has been named by Newsweek, as well as Old Lyme, as being one of the best schools in the country, and we need to continue to work. Yeah, how about a round of applause for them? Thank you.
We could hold the applause. The next question, unless there's further rebuttal on that, goes to Ms. Bjornberg. And the questioner points out that the Democratic majority approved the biggest tax increase in state history. Why should the district elect you and increase the Democratic majority?
I think that it's unfortunate that my voice wasn't in the room when those decisions were made. And in fact, Art actually did have a voice in the legislature when that went through. So if you're looking to ask questions to somebody, I would toss it his way, because the fact of the matter is that I maintain that had I been there, things would be different.
Senator Linares, you're up next.
Well, I voted against a gasoline tax increase. I voted against a spending increase in the state of Connecticut because we have a very big issue with our finances, as everybody here knows. So, you know, it's funny, my opponent's party has supported the largest tax increase in our state history, over 16% increase in spending over the past 4 years. I talk to taxpayers all day long, knocking on doors, Democrats, unaffiliated, Republicans. They just can't handle the tax increases anymore. They're worn out. And I promise I will not increase new taxes or increase taxes one more dime until we balance the budget here in Connecticut.
Mr. Bennett, you want to weigh in? I know you can't. It was specific to Ms. Bjornberg, but you know the issue of the big tax increase and whether that was good policy or not.
I'm going to save my time if it's okay with you.
All right. Can we go back then to Ms. Bjornberg? You really said things would have been different if you were there. Would you have voted for the tax increase? Well, how would they be different? Could you elaborate?
Yeah, I think that those things are built with consensus in the caucus room and on the floor. And I do believe that I have a very good ability to build consensus, to make a case, and to be a strong advocate on behalf of the things that I believe in.
Senator Linares, any comment having been up there a couple of years?
I have 3 minutes and 16 seconds left. If you notice, my opponent did not say whether or not she would have voted yes or no for that budget.
Okay, and the next question goes to Senator Linares. The questioner wants to know, did you support the gun law that was passed in the wake of the Newtown shooting? Would you seek to repeal it if reelected? And short of repeal, what changes, if any, would you propose?
First of all, I want to say that my thoughts and prayers go out to the victims and the families of Sandy Hook. I sat in an auditorium in Sandy Hook, just like this, and listened to the families' concerns. And I made sure that on behalf of the 33rd District that they knew that we empathized with them and that we were praying for them and that we cared for them. Now, as far as the legislation 1160 goes, I voted against the bill because it caused unnecessary harm for law-abiding citizens, and we should be focusing on taking guns away from criminals, not from people who follow the law.
These are good whole questions. I don't have too much time left. Go ahead.
Also, the bill did not have a public hearing, and after the Haddam land swap, where the people's voices were shut off, we need to make sure that people have a chance to voice their opinions in Hartford. That bill did not have that opportunity. So it was a bad bill. I'd rather vote no for a bad bill than yes just because it's popular. Thank you.
Mr. Bennett.
So I'm going to be generous here and say that the average age of the folks in this audience is 45. As such, I'm guessing that most people in this room have been through this before, if not necessarily participating in a debate, at least hearing candidate after candidate after candidate ad nauseum talk about what she or he would do when elected. But we all know, at least hopefully, because I certainly know, that it doesn't quite frankly matter what a candidate promises to do when elected. So, the issues of gun control, gun safety is incredibly, incredibly complicated. The tragedy that happened at Sandy Hook, are our new gun laws really going to prevent future things like that happening? I don't know, and quite frankly, I don't think so. I'm not a big fan of guns. I'll be honest with you. I mean, what are guns purpose for? I know that the argument is, yes, self-defense, but really self-defense for what? Guns kill people. That's a fact. Not going so far as to say I'm anti-gun, but I think that the solutions to our ridiculous violence rates in this country need to be much more thought out than, you know, bullet points or talking points on a campaign stage. And the only thing I can say, or I will promise you, is that no matter what, if and when elected, this is an issue that I would spend probably among the most time thinking about, because it's that complicated. How do we protect our young people, our children? How do we protect ourselves from folks out there that mean to do us harm? Like, there's no easy answer to that.
Thank you. And Ms. Bjornberg, would you have supported the gun law, or do you support repeal or any changes to it?
I want to start by saying that I actually come from a multi-generational family of hunters, and I have both a father and a husband who are in the military. But I also had a 6-year-old child on the day of Sandy Hook, and I will never forget what that felt like. Nobody understands all the sides of the gun issue like I do. And the truth is that everyone who lived in the state of Connecticut knew that something was coming down the pike legislatively after that tragedy occurred. But my advice at the end of the day for parents who look to their leadership for assurance would be the same as my advice to gun owners who look to their leadership for advocacy. You should be aware that well over a week after SB 1160 passed, Art Linares was at the Estuary Council in Old Saybrook and was quoted in the Valley News Now as saying that he still hadn't made time to read the bill. Parents and hunters alike should know better than to let that lack of advocacy continue. No one wins when we have legislators who shirk their primary duty, which is advocating for their constituents. All that he did at the end of the day was to ensure that our voices were not heard.
I didn't hear in there, we'll give Senator Linares a chance, would you have voted for the law or not? I just want to make sure I heard that.
Talking to me?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, I would have voted for the gun
Okay.
control law.
All right, thank you. Senator Linares, do you want to respond to anything that was said?
Yeah, absolutely. I only have 2 minutes left, but of course I read the law. That's what legislators do. I was misquoted by the Valley News Now, a local blog. Of course I read the law. I read it line by line, and that's why I voted against it. Thank you.
Mr. Bennett is up next. We see our time. We're going to go to about 10 after because we started a little late. If people could, the timekeepers could hold up their time for the candidates so we'll know what they're working with. Okay, and there we go. And Mr. Bennett, next question to you. I want to go back to a question asked in the first debate, and that was if you could list your top 3 legislative priorities to encourage economic growth and job creation in the state if you were elected.
So again, just to reiterate, I guess, really pushing for investing in new technologies and clean energy in both, also, redundant, manufacturing of said technologies. Additionally, I think it came up in the first debate, the House debate that just happened. I'm not sure if it's going to come up, so I'll just bring it up. I think that, just to put the cards on the table, that we should 100% absolutely legalize marijuana. I think the fact that we criminalize people who do something as simple as smoke marijuana is ridiculous, especially when states like Washington and Colorado have led the way in showing that, oh my God, the sky is not going to fall when we legalize marijuana. I mean, I haven't spent, I think, any time in this building, but I've actually spent a bunch of time in that high school. I did not go to that high school. I went to St. Bernard's for 3 years before I transferred to Westbrook. And let me tell you, like, the things that I saw go on in that high school not that long ago would probably blow a lot of your mind. But the fact of the matter is, none of these kids, myself included, were bad kids. We would just do silly things. And to criminalize people for smoking pot is ridiculous, especially when Colorado, for example, is on the cusp of bringing in at least or approximately $20 million in tax revenue from legalization of marijuana. Again, Other states have already shown that this is a common sense thing to do. We should not be spending money on police enforcement, on incarceration, on something as ridiculous as marijuana.
That's two. Do you want to add a third, or you good?
No.
Okay. Economic development priorities, at least your top three, if you could. And this is Ms. Bjornberg.
Thank you. For me, it's all about small businesses. I want to make sure that we improve access to credit, that we're cutting red tape, and that we are lowering barriers. You know, the reality is that through hard times, we all have to tighten our own belts. And for me, that includes my household budget. We need to learn to live within our means, and the state of Connecticut does too. Inside of our small towns, what that means is making sure that we increase education aid and keep our property taxes low and our energy costs low too.
And Senator Linares.
I've been an advocate to make sure that we keep our energy costs low, that I've been petitioning this recent rate hike. We need to make sure that we don't slap another rate hike on our hardworking people here in Connecticut. Also, we need to have a more competitive tax code, as I mentioned. Our tax rates for gasoline, sales tax, and income tax are much higher than our neighboring states. And it's hard for businesses to leave America. It's easy for them to leave Connecticut. And we need to make sure that they stay here. We change our attitude towards businesses. Make Connecticut one of the best places in the country to start and grow a business. That's what I'm committed to doing, coming up with a predictable, consistent tax code, balancing our budget without increasing taxes. Thank you.
Okay, this will be the last question. It was asked. I didn't get to it in the first round, the first debate. Is the governor's energy program emphasizing expansion of natural gas and incentives to generate more wind and solar power the right approach, or an example of the state interfering with the free market? So the question concerns the governor's energy program, and goes to Ms. Bjornberg, and this will be our last question before we go to closing statements.
I think obviously that we need to invest in renewable energy for sure, and to be able to diversify the ways in which we get energy around here and make sure that it is affordable for everybody. I actually think that we need to maintain all of the strengths that we have in Connecticut and all of the things that make this state a great place to live, including education and infrastructure. But the fact of the matter at the end of the day is that for Art Linares to sit here and say that he just testified at a hearing to try to keep energy costs low, while at the same time running a business that has taken tens of millions of dollars in ratepayer subsidy money that will be raked out over the next 15 years, that is in part responsible for the rate hikes that he is then testifying against. And when he sits up here and says that Brent Cleveland is someone who has a history of making jewelry safe for our children, that is beyond disingenuous. I would urge everyone in this auditorium tonight to go home and Google the name Brent Cleveland and look through the history of who he is and what he has spent his professional career doing, because it doesn't just end with cadmium. Before, he was traveling across the United States testifying on behalf of the cadmium industry to make sure that we can continue to hang a heavy metal from the ears and the necks and the wrists of our little girls. He also was traveling across the country testifying on behalf of lead. Nobody in this room tonight thinks that it was a mistake to take lead out of our paint or out of our gasoline. And there was industry pushback when we did that too. There were people who claimed to be nice guys, who said that they had our children's best interest in mind, and who stood there and pretended that taking lead out of those products would bring an industry to its knees. I am not going to take that as an excuse. As a mother and as somebody who is fully invested in making sure that our kids stay healthy and the generations to come stay strong, I will push back on industry when it matters for our children and our families. And Art, if you're worried about spending and debt, then I would like to ask you tonight to make a pledge not to take additional subsidy money or ratepayer money from the people who you're so worried about that are struggling in this state.
Can we hold up to Senator Linares how much time she has, how much time he has left? Okay, a minute and 10. Not much, Senator Linares, but I wanted to
First of
know
all,
what you're working with.
It's not ratepayer money. It's called a ZREC program. It's actually something that Hillary and Bill Clinton both support. It's a cap and trade program for utility companies to offset their carbon emissions by buying clean renewable power. So you should get your facts straight, Ms. Bjornberg.
Okay, anything to add? You got a little time left, and then we'll be going to closing statements. If not, we'll go to Mr. Bennett. And the question was energy policy.
So I talked a little bit about energy policy, so I'm just kind of curious, all the people in this room, raise your hand if you haven't decided who you're going to vote for yet. Yikes.
But it will be on theday.com, and people can watch it that may have not made up their mind.
So as far as stabilizing energy rates, it's, again, common sense. There's literally only one way to do that. Fossil fuels are a finite resource. There's only so much methane in the ground, there's only so much petroleum in the ground, and there's only so much coal in the ground, and they're going to run out. That is a fact, 100% fact. So the only way to reduce energy costs based on the law of supply and demand is to invest in renewable energy, which I think that we need to be doing absolutely 100% today. We see a lot of growth around the world, and including in Connecticut in this field, but we really, really need to ramp up that production. Emily talked a little bit about, money in terms of government grants and subsidies. I'm just kind of curious because obviously I'm a Green Party candidate, it says right there. That means, very simply put to me, that we as Green Party candidates spend or accept $0, again, $0 from any corporation or PAC, which means when elected, we are beholden to our constituents and our constituents only. So I'm not spending a lot of money on this campaign because I don't believe that we should have to spend a lot of money to serve our state. In the last debate earlier, there was talked about public service. I mean, my 100% adult life has been dedicated to public service. That's not to say every single thing I do is public service, but the vast majority of it is. I spent 12 years in the United States Coast Guard Reserve. My job in the Coast Guard was as marine science technician. That meant I was responsible for helping to prevent marine pollution in Connecticut. I also spent 2 months in the Gulf of Mexico responding
I think your time has run out. Am I right? 40 seconds. Okay, I'm sorry.
Responding to the BP oil spill disaster. Y'all remember that back in 2010? So that, along with some experiences in the coal fields of West Virginia and the fracking fields of Pennsylvania, have allowed me to see firsthand the direct impacts that our fossil fuel addiction can have on the people who are living in these energy resource zones. So the point is 100% yes, we need to be relying and investing in renewable energy.
All right, thank you. Could we show Senator Linares' time, please? 54 seconds? Okay.
I think the greatest opportunity in America for job growth and for energy independence is investing in different energy sources like wind, like solar, like geothermal. We incentivize big oil by the billions of dollars. There is plenty of money going to oil companies across this country. We need to make sure that every technology has an opportunity to advance. We need to make sure entrepreneurs in America get a chance to start businesses in the renewable energy sector, grow and develop clean, renewable energy jobs. I'm a huge advocate for it. It's part of my life. It's what I do, and I'm happy to do it for the state of Connecticut and across this country.
And I think you have a little time left.
Yeah. And also, in order to solve...
I think that was it. Is that 12 seconds? Okay.
We need to make a push for energy independence in America. That's something I will fight for. We need to make sure that we do it. We do it now, and I'm an advocate for clean, renewable energy.
Thank you. And little time left. Ms. Bjornberg, everyone's used their time up. You want to kind of make a statement before we go to closings?
Sure, thank you. There are a lot of things at the end of the day that I think are really important about who we are inside of our small towns. And there are a lot of things that I think are really important in particular when we talk about the American dream. The American dream is not entirely about profits. People do not put on a military uniform or put on their bunker gear and run into a burning building because of profits. They do it because they want to invest in the ties that bind us to one another. They do it because they believe in putting community first and protecting with everything they have the things that we all hold dear. And at the end of the day, if we do not stand for the safety of our children, then I do not know what we stand for. Art Linares, again and again, voted against bans that would have kept toxins away from our children, and then turned around and shirked his duty on the cadmium task force and put an industry rep in his place, and then pretended as if that industry rep did not have a vested stake in keeping toxins next to the bodies of our children. I think we've got to change that kind of leadership. We should stand up and demand this November to finally have true leadership that stands up on our behalf. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move to closing statements. We'll start with Mr. Bennett, and we'll work our way across the table. Mr. Bennett, you have a minute.
First of all, thank you, Emily. Thank you, Art. It's truly an honor to be up here with both of you. And again, thank you to everybody out there. I guess I'll sum up by saying, because it didn't come up earlier, I'm also a parent. My daughter, Daisy, she just turned 15 last month. She actually spent the first half of her education in Lyme. She went to Lyme Consolidated. Some of you that might have children or grandchildren might remember her, Daisy Bennett. She's wonderful. And so really the reason that I'm up here, especially if you knew anything about, I kind of alluded to this, the track that I was on when I was in high school and just after that, like me even being up here is like, whew, it's like a miracle. But the reason that I'm up here 100% is because I am a parent, and more than anything in the world, I want to make sure that when Daisy is an adult, she has a livable planet with a sustainable economy, with clean air and clean water that she can make her own life in. So that's why I am up here, to make sure, not just for her, but primarily her, like there's a little bit of self-interest here, that all of our children and our grandchildren have a sustainable future.
Thank you. Senator Linares, your turn. 1 minute.
I've committed long hours and many days traveling through this district, listening to you, the people, hearing your concerns and understanding some of your struggles. We might not always agree on every issue, but I believe we agree on most. What I do think we can all agree on is that our state is becoming too expensive for our children to someday work, raise a family, and live. I understand the importance of growing our economy to create jobs and grow business, but we need to go back to Hartford and continue to promote that vision of Connecticut if we wish to keep Connecticut a place that our children and their children can call home. We will not accomplish this by continuing to send people to Hartford that actually believe that government can tax and spend this problem away. I'm Art Linares, and I'm asking for your vote on November 4th. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Bjornberg?
For me, this election is truly about sustainability. As a working mother, I want to be sure that the state that Jason and I have chosen to raise our children in is going to be set up to be strong economically and environmentally for generations to come. I think the voters have a very clear choice in this election. We need a stronger voice for our 12 towns in Hartford. We deserve someone who wants to protect our children, preserve our environment, invest in our communities, employ our veterans, and get the economy growing in a sustainable manner by augmenting support for the true drivers of our economic climate, small business. I ask for your vote on November 4th because I know we deserve leadership that puts the best interests of our small towns, our small businesses, our children, and our seniors above all else. Thank you all for coming, and I look forward to seeing you on the campaign trail.
All right, thank you. Now we can all applaud.